everyone, my name is Steve. I'm one of the business development managers here at TechCode, and we'll be running the accelerator that we'll be launching in April. Let's welcome Vitaly Golomb. He's an author, mentor, and investor, as well as an entrepreneur. And tonight we're going to have a really good discussion about accelerators in general, as well as investing. So please make this interactive. Ask questions if you have anything that's concerning the presentation, and you'll be more than happy to answer them. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody. All right, so it's the end of the day. Everybody's a little tired, yeah? Anybody catch the Republican debate on the radio? Some good comedy. All right, so I need you guys to be really happy. We're going to do a selfie together to start things off. All right, so can everybody, let's see.
You should do it with the right hand.
Throw your hands up. All right. Okay, be happy. All right, so I'll post that. So speaking of posting things, if you want to follow along, and I have lots of graphics and things that you might want to share that might be surprising for you. Hashtag Accelerated Startup. I'm Vitaly G on Twitter. Anybody still use Twitter? Yeah? Still use a little Twitter? Yeah? Okay. All right, good. It'll survive this year a little bit. All right, so let's dive right into it. How many of you have started a company before? Okay, keep your hands up if you are planning to start a company within this year. Okay. And the rest of you are working in big companies? What are you doing here? So, you're here for some reason, you're curious, you're entrepreneur curious. So hopefully the ones that are dedicated to startups, I will give you some more ammunition and motivation. The ones of you that are on the fence but are ready will be a little bit more ready. And the ones who are on the fence but are not quite ready, you will realize how hard it is. All right, so we'll dive right in. So my background real quick. I was born in Ukraine, in Odessa, Ukraine. Grew up in Silicon Valley from the age of 8. Went to Homestead High School, the famous Homestead High School of Steve Jobs and Wozniak, and really grew up in the thick of it. Got exposed to the startup world very early on. By 18, I was knee-deep in the dot-com world. So I've gone through the last 3 cycles. Spoiler alert, this year is going to be very difficult for startups. You'll see this starting mid-April. People are going to start panicking a little bit. It's going to be a little bit less traffic on 101 by the end of the year, but it's normal. It's okay. How many of you have been here for more than 5 years? Okay, so you know how it works out. Those of you that haven't, surprise. So I sold my last company in August, a company in software space for the printing industry, which I was involved with since a very early age. I ran an organization with a couple of partners in Europe where we put on 7 different conferences in 7 countries, which are more about educating entrepreneurs. And I've been a long-term mentor with a number of different accelerators around the world, including obviously famous 500 startups. Looking forward to what TechCode does, a lot of very interesting things, kind of different perspective, and a lot of power from the East. And I'm working on a book, most of you probably know. It's called Accelerated Startup. So it's basically everything that I've been teaching entrepreneurs in these different accelerator programs, all in one book, start to finish. So for those that are trying to get into the world's top accelerators that are harder to get into than Stanford or Harvard business programs, or for folks that want to do it on their own, or are trying to apply the same techniques to businesses that are not traditionally venture backable. So a lot of these are very interesting techniques for sales and marketing and growth, rapid growth, that are developed in accelerators that are ran by startups that are venture backed, and they can apply to a lot of different types of companies. So take a look. If you want the slides, if you want to get in touch with me after, if you want to tell me that you didn't like anything that I said, you can go to golomb.net/techcode, and you can do it on your phone. And you can get actually first chapter of the book, you can get a link to the slides and everything else as well. All right? So we'll dive right in with that little intro. So there are 2 types of people in the business world. Right? There are corporate people who are experts usually in one area. Right? Spend years climbing the ladder, come in, probably straight out of college, have the illusion of a stable lifestyle. They go to work sometime in the morning, leave sometime before dinner, right? They have real responsibilities. They have this kind of framework that they live around, and they have this kind of illusion of life balance, right? They hate their job, they hopefully love their family, and that's their life balance, but they don't spend too many hours at work, right? Startup people are very different. Startup people are usually generalists. Very good or way above average at a lot of different things. You have to be good at a lot of different things. Usually get an early start. So I got started as an intern in a startup when I was 13 years old. That's not very typical. But usually by the time, kind of midway through college, that's a normal entrepreneur kind of gets the bug and starts tinkering with something. Sometimes we'll leave the college world early, right? Famously, Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, etc., other examples. But certainly, right out of college, they understand they want to be in this startup world. Usually have a cheap lifestyle, right? You eat ramen in college, and you just keep eating ramen, and you think that's normal, right, while you're working on your startup. And you really have nothing to lose. Nothing else matters, right? Nothing else matters but the startup. So when you have somebody that's making a transition mid-career from corporate world into the startup world, it is a shock. It's a shock to the system because they're used to kind of stable lifestyle, having to do their job, being good at their one job. All of a sudden they have to be good at a lot of different things. They have to do things a lot faster. They have to deal with all of this, right? So you have to, for yourself, I mean, there's probably maybe a few of you young enough that just finished college not too long ago, but you have to make a decision. Where are you going, right? And hopefully we'll explore that a little bit more. So what do you have to do to succeed with a startup, right? First of all, you have to know grammar to succeed with a startup. Little joke. But what is a startup, right? So if we went to IKEA, we bought ourselves a startup, what would it be? So first of all, a startup is an experiment in search of a business model. So I hope everybody's hand goes up to this next question I'm going to ask. But do you know who Steve Blank is? Yes? Who knows who Steve Blank is? Really? Holy shit.
Jacob Reese's mentor.
Eric Reese's, yes. So Eric, okay, how many of you have heard of the Lean Startup? Okay, so Lean Startup is Steve Blank for Dummies. Right? So, wow, I'm really surprised. So Steve Blank, a lot of people actually give him credit for coining the term startup. He's a he built 4 different companies. He was a venture capitalist. He's now a Stanford professor in entrepreneurship. He's been a little quiet for the last year. Maybe that's why you guys don't recognize him, but I would highly encourage you to read him. It's a little bit of a tangent, but he is the brain in the startup world. So he says it's an experiment in search of a business model. So what does that mean? It means that a startup is not a small version of a large company. A startup is an experiment, right? You have a thesis, and you're trying to prove this thesis. You're trying to find a business model, right? So when you find a business model, when you have a product market fit, you know who your customer is, you know how to sell to them, and they're actively buying your product or service, you start building this repeatable sales model, and you start hiring managers in your company. You start hiring people with some experience in a more narrow area, because now you're starting to get an idea of what your business is actually going to look like, right, when it becomes a business. So you get into this transition period where it's growing and you're hiring more and more people every month, and it's exciting, and then people are sleeping under their desks. That's a very exciting time, and that's the time you learn the most in a startup environment. So what I recommend for folks that are just getting out of college and they're really in love with this idea of startup, well, your first startup should not be your own. You should actually go to a company that found this product market fit and is scaling very quickly, because you learn more in that year or two at that company in this period of time than you'll ever learn on your own, right? There are just things you can't learn in school, out of a book, out of a textbook. You just have to do it, right? And it's a big reason why Silicon Valley moves so fast, right? In Silicon Valley, and there's also a reason why big venture firms are only focusing on Silicon Valley, is because you have about 50,000 experienced director-level people in the tech industry here, where you might have a few hundred in New York, and you might have individuals in Europe and Asia, etc. So far, right? That's going to change, but so far. So when these companies get to a certain size, their limiting factor becomes how fast they can hire experienced people and compete on a world-class level, right? So if you want to build a unicorn, you almost have to, depending on the industry, you almost have to be here and find the people that are experienced in this crazy high growth, high-paced growth. So when you get to break even, maybe a little bit profitable, you get to a rapid scale, you start hiring senior management, people with gray hair and very long resumes. You get to about 150 people, that's when it becomes a company, right? So this is really the path, right? Experiment, scale it up as you try to figure it out, and then you become a company. Now the crazy thing is that most founders of companies, especially those that start young and get lucky and find something that works, that don't have any management experience, 2/3 of them don't survive as a CEO to the end. 2/3 of them don't survive because they've never managed people, right? And if you're an airline pilot and you fly in instruments, you need some experience, right? So if you're a CEO of a company with hundreds of people, more people than you can walk around and talk to every day, you have to kind of fly a little bit on instruments. Does that make sense? So keep that in mind. And don't be disappointed. So Dave McClure, I hope everyone knows Dave McClure, 500 Startups, yes? 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 Okay. Thank goodness. All right, so he says, very eloquently, startup company is confused about what its product is, who its customers are, and how to make money. And I look at it slightly differently still, right? Your default state is failure. If you don't do anything, if you just have an idea in your head, nothing's going to happen, right? So your job is to unfail it, right? The default state is failure. You have to move the rock up the hill. So why would you want to start a startup, right? Why would you want to start a company? Let's talk about it. So a normal career, right? Normal career that you may have gone through. You get good grades in school, you get into a good college, you get into a good company out of a good college, you get regular promotions for 20, 30 years, you retire, play golf, and die. It's the American dream, right? 2.5 kids and a dog and a white picket fence. 30 years at the same company. By the way, this doesn't exist anymore. Don't tell my mom. Your startup career path, if successful, everybody thinks that, oh, well, this company got founded and tomorrow they're billionaires, right? That's kind of what you hear about. You hear about 4 or 5 of those companies every year that sold for $1 billion or hundreds of millions of dollars. And their overnight successes 10 years in the making, first of all. Right? They work really hard. Second of all, there are 3,500 companies that get professionally funded in Silicon Valley every year. About 10% of those survive to the Series A round, where they raise millions, usually, at this point. Right? And maybe a handful of them have big exits and wins. Right? So we'll get back to the odds in a second, but think about that. What it really looks like is a little bit more like this. Right? It is a crazy path. It is very difficult. It is emotionally difficult. It's going to overtake your life. It is very, very hard. So you have to, entrepreneurship is a mental disorder, right? Why would you want to choose this path of pain and uncertainty, of almost certain failure, right? When you can just have a normal career, go to work for 8 hours a day, come home, watch TV, or do whatever you like, right? Good question, right? It's a valid question. Well, it takes a little bit of crazy to change the world. So most people that are doing it for the right reason are there to change the world. They want to fix a problem. They've identified something that bothers them, and they see an opportunity there, and they want to solve it. Right? They're not directly motivated by money. If you're directly motivated by money, get a finance degree, go to Wall Street, and you make a whole lot more money, with a much higher degree of certainty. But if you want to create technology, you want to solve a problem, if you do a good job, that will bring you money indirectly. Right? So what's your personal motivation? Right? Why are you doing it? Well, is it for the money? Right? Do you think that you're going to be rich? Well, I hate to break it to you, you're probably better off playing the lottery, right, than the startup lottery. Maybe for the IPO money, right? You think you're going to take your company public. You're going to be the one that does it, right? One of the few. Well, let's look at the numbers. So if you look at 1999, that was the peak of tech IPOs worldwide, 371 peak tech IPOs. I think maybe 10 of those companies are still around. And last year was actually a down year. Right? So we already kind of peaked in 2014 for this particular cycle. Right? We have these S-curves, and I'll get back to the different technology S-curves, but we're looking at, probably a couple of more down years before the next cycle spins up. Right? And on average, it takes 8 to 10 years to take a company public, from founding it to go public. Right? So a funded startup success rate, as I promised, 30% of them completely fail. They return 0 capital to their investors. Right? 30% are unprofitable. They operate for a while and then they will slowly die, and maybe they'll sell themselves for less money than they raised. 30% will return some capital. They'll return more money to their investors over a long period of time usually, right? And it's usually not really a good investment because they could have taken the same money and put it into S&P 500 and made 8 to 10% a year or what have you, right? But they still return more money than they took in. And then maybe 10% are considered big successes. They return a multiple. They return 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 50,000 times the money to their investors, right? It's like WhatsApp. It would be the extreme example. So this whole thing, failure is good, and you probably heard this, read this, yeah, failing is good, fail fast, fail early. Well, it's a little over-glorified, because all failure is, it is a hard lesson, right? And the statistics are behind that. The odds are against you, right? If you're a first-time founder, your chances of not completely failing are about 18%. Right? If you're first time, it's your first company. If you're a repeat fail founder, congratulations, your odds are 2% better on your next one. You can only learn so much from failure. But if you're a repeat successful founder, your odds go up by a lot, right? So you can choose. You can either try your luck and do it on your own, and a lot of people choose to do that, and a lot of people believe in themselves, and a good amount of people succeed. Or you can get a lot of experience by working in one of those fast-paced startups and learning by doing that, right? Absorbing a lot of things that actually work. So if you're lucky and you're good, chances are your positive exit will be to get acquired, right? And 2-3 years ago, for example, Yahoo was just buying companies that technically were failing, but they were buying them for their team because they're trying to build up their mobile team. So that's what you can expect. Now, are you doing it for freedom, right? Maybe you're doing it, that's your big motivation. You want to be free, you have a problem with authority, you know better, your boss is an idiot, right? Well, normal job, you have one boss, right? Remember this guy? So that's a normal job, you have one boss. It could be annoying, could be whatever, you don't like him, etc. But guess what? With a startup, every user is your boss. You're going to be doing things that you do not like or you don't want to do. You're going to be answering customer support calls very late at night and making up a name, say, hello, this is Bob from customer service, how can I help you? Right? Because you're not going to have any help, especially at first. You're going to be doing everything yourself. And you're going to be at the will, you're going to have to bend to find those customers and get it working. If you have a family, who of you here have a family? All right, bad news for you. They will suffer. Ben Horowitz, as a startup CEO, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried. So you're going to go through a very tough time. It is emotionally taxing, right? Maybe you're thinking, well, I've always worked long hours. I'm just going to work long hours on my startup. Guess what? You're not going to stop thinking about your company or reading your email constantly or doing any of those things when you get home or on the weekend or whenever you spend time with your kids and your family. You're going to be a zombie. I guarantee it. It's very difficult to unplug, especially those first few years when you're building something, right? So keep that in mind. Make sure that your spouse is on board. Otherwise, it'll be a big problem for you, right? Now, depression in the startup world is not a joke. Right? There was a recent survey of over 200 entrepreneurs, and 30% had depression, 29% had ADHD, 27% had anxiety. That's about 3 times the normal population. So 3 times the normal population. There's a link, you can download the presentation if you go to this short link. There's a whole report on that. But you have to keep it in perspective. How many of you were kind of in the sales world or had a sales job? Okay, so you have an advantage in the sales world because you're used to hearing no. You have to keep things in perspective. Right? The company is not you. You have to keep it separate. You can't get totally emotionally invested in your company. You have to be objective, right? And you also have to play cheerleader to your team. If you're the CEO, you have to come in every morning jumping for joy doing backflips, no matter how bad it was. Maybe yesterday was really bad, maybe the day before that was really bad, but you have to look at the big picture, and if you're making progress, if you're ahead of where you were a month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, that's what it's really all about, right? You have more bad days than good days until you turn the corner and really start building that business, and it'll start moving, and you get traction, right? VC's favorite word is traction. So, have I talked you out of doing startups yet?
No.
How many of you are going to quit? I see kind of unsure looks. All right, so good news, you can improve your chances. Right, so I'll give you some hacks on how to do that. So first of all, find a problem that you can't live without solving. Right? There are a lot of people that are just thinking, oh, I want to do a startup, and then the idea is secondary. They just pick something and do it without doing much research, etc., without having much expertise in it. Oh, we'll figure it out. Well, guess what? It'll take you about a year to go from idea to something, probably on average about 2 years to get to a point where you can start selling something to customers, right, from the starting point, and probably 5 to 8 years to see if this thing has actually got legs and it's going to work. So that means is if you start at 22 right out of college, you might have maybe 3 startups in you before you have to be an adult, get a real job, and build a real life, as your mom would say, right? So you have to figure out a problem that is both really interesting to the outside world, right? It's a big market, it's a growing market, people are interested in it, you don't want to swim upstream, right? And it's something that you know really well. You know the solution. You worked in some industry for a long time, you found something, some problem that nobody else sees, and you know the solution, right? And it keeps bugging you. For 6 months, you're just thinking about this thing and it won't leave you alone. That's an idea usually worth pursuing. So the other thing, and I see a lot of this in Eastern Europe, I spent a lot of time in Europe, and there are a lot of engineers there. And engineers like to build a toy for themselves, and then they want to turn that into a business. It usually doesn't work that way. You have to identify a problem in a market, right? And you have to build a solution, the right solution for it. Usually not backwards. The odds of you coming up with some toy that you built for yourself, and it could be hardware, it could be software, or some script, and stumbling on a huge market opportunity are close to zero, right? You usually have to look for problems in the market and then build the right solution for it, not backwards, right? So how many of you are engineers? So be warned, don't do this. I've seen this a million times. So what is all this lean bullshit? Pardon my French. So what is lean, right? How many of you have actually read this book, not just bought it? Yeah, I see those laughs. That means you have the book, but you haven't read it. So a few of you have actually read it. And what does it mean? If you really boil it down to is being lean is doing quick iterations. And why is that important? It's important because you get more chances to solve the problem. Let's say you raised $100,000 from your grandma and your rich uncle, right? Your friends, family, and fools round. They believe in you. Well, that $100,000 it starts a stopwatch. Right, you have a certain amount of time. So when you're lean and you're doing quick iterations and you're not sitting in the garage and trying to polish a product that nobody else has seen, it gives you more chances to actually solve the problem. Right, you get more hits at the target. Right, so more chances to unfail it. Right, the chances of you hitting it on the first try are close to zero. You're going to have to keep working at it. So what's a good startup from the investor's eyes? What do we look at? What do we look for? First things first is traction. Nothing matters more than traction. What is traction? If you have a free app, it's a number of downloads. It's the growth over growth. How fast is your growth accelerating? Right? Are you growing at 20% a month? Are you growing at 50% a month? Or are you stagnant? Or is your excuse, well, if somebody gave me money, I'd be growing. But right now we have 0 customers, or 3 customers, and that's what we had for a year. That's not traction, right? Or if you have obviously a paid service like a SaaS for business, you want to show that people are using it, you're getting contracts, people are signing on, etc. Right? So it's very important to focus on this. And early on, nothing else matters. Not where your office is, what kind of desk and chair you have, what kind of computer you have, if you take your team out to lunch, nothing matters. If you don't nail your product market fit, you don't figure out who your customer is and how to sell them your product and get them excited in using it, everything else doesn't matter. So if you remember just one thing tonight, this is the most important thing, is you have to focus until you have product market fit. You don't spend a penny of the money that you raised or the money that you saved that you're putting in yourself on anything else. Everything else is just a distraction. Things are not working, you want to move some furniture around, it feels like you're working, right? That's not going to get you closer to your goal. So again, solve a painful problem for a specific customer. I can't tell you how many if I had a nickel for every time somebody would come up to me and say, we solve every problem for everybody, I'd have a shitload of nickels, right? You have to pick a specific customer with a specific problem so you can really polish your product, all your marketing, everything towards that. Solve that problem, show traction, and if it works, you can always go after additional customers after that. But not vice versa, right? You can't go wide and then go narrow. You start really narrow, make sure it works, and then go from there. So how can you be sure that you're solving an actual problem, right? They say if you can convince one other person, it's a vision. If you can't, it's a hallucination, right? So how can you be sure it's solving a problem? Well, how is it currently being solved? I don't believe in geniuses. You're not going to come to me and say, well, you know what, everybody in the world is stupid. They don't see this problem, but I do. And nobody's really solving it. A lot of times, really what you have to think about is, are your customers or your users, are they trying to do this in some other way? Maybe you don't have direct competition. Maybe you stumbled on a new technology that allows you to solve this in a better, faster, cheaper way, right? And hopefully that's the fact. That's the case. But people are going to be solving this problem in some other ways, right? They're going to be, well, number one competition for you is inaction. How do you get people to actually do something? So when somebody goes on stage and says, we have no competition, and drop the mic at some startup competition, I always laugh them off the stage because that means that there's no problem and there's no business to build there, right? If you have no competition, there's nothing to do there, right? You are not the smartest person in the world. Especially around here, there's a lot of smart people that move to Bay Area, right? So here's what you have to do. If you're an engineer, you have to stop coding, you have to get out of the building, you have to talk to your customers, face your fears, and validate your assumptions, right? Everything in your head is assumptions until you talk to a customer and they sign up and they tell you they're delighted to use your product or they pay you. That's even better. If they pay you, it's even better, right? So when you're looking at the world and you're pitching and you're going out and talking about your company, and by the way, you should be doing a lot of that. You shouldn't be fearful that somebody's going to steal your stupid idea because ideas are worthless. It's all about execution, right? How are you better, faster, cheaper than the status quo? How are you solving this problem? Right? Now, a very important factor that a lot of people overlook is the size of the market. Right? And you may have stumbled on this if you've talked to investors. This question always comes up. And I'll give you some insights on why and what's important. Right? So first of all, when you're going after a huge market, you can say, we're going after $1 trillion market. I can tell you from personal experience, and by the way, all these mistakes that I'm showing you and talking about, I've made them myself. I went after the $700 billion printing industry. That's a huge industry, right? Well, the problem with that industry, and many others, is that it's stagnant. It's not really growing. In some cases, it's shrinking. And it's owned entirely by public companies that are huge, right? So when you're going into an existing market, you have to compete for every single customer, and you have to take that customer away from a large company that has a better brand, more money, and more loyalty than you, right? If you're going into a new market that might be small today but will be huge in a few years, it might be growing 20, 30, 50, 100% per year. So what that means is if you get into that market, you have an equal chance of growing with that market and fighting for those new customers along with everybody else, right? And usually big companies, their businesses are designed around completely different older markets. They're not designed around these new markets, so they're going to miss it. They're going to end up waking up 5 years from now and buying one of those startups because it's already a turnkey new business for them, right? Make sense? So let's take a look at kind of where the whole industry is going right now and where you should be looking for ideas, right? So Wayne Gretzky, he skates to where the puck is, right? Everybody knows that quote. It was Steve Jobs' favorite quote. It's like there was an interview with Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, for those of you who don't know. They asked him, how are you so much better than everybody else? Well, I don't skate to where the puck used to be. I'm skating to where the puck is going to be, right? So if you look at, this is from Chris Dixon's article that just came out a few days ago. Anybody catch this article? Okay, so I recommend you Google that article. But the idea is very simple, right? You have these S-curves. You have this gestation period, right? You can see this is 1976 through 2015. And you can see here's the growth phase, right? So here's the PC era, right? It started here. So if you came up today, 20 years too late and said, I'm going to launch a new computer company, good luck to you. That wave has kind of passed. right? And you have the PC era here ending, right? And you have the internet era overlapping, and you have all these new companies, right? Coming in with the internet era. And then overlap with the mobile era. And we can say that mobile era has pretty much peaked. So what's next? Right? You have to think about where is the puck going to be. And there are a few different technologies. There's augmented reality, virtual reality, IoT, robotics, artificial intelligence, all these things that are kind of the next paradigm of technology, right? As the technology develops, we have all these new opportunities to solve the same old problems in new, very innovative ways and actually discover markets we didn't know existed before. So if you're going to start something today, you should really be looking 5-10 years into the future, right? Because by the time your company becomes a company or your idea becomes a company, a few years are going to go by, right? So you don't want to miss the trend. And investors are looking at these trends. Investors are very good at looking at these S-curves, right? As things develop and then they have a quick growth and then they plateau, right? Investors are good at that, looking forward. So if you're pitching them something, the next messaging app or, God forbid, the next social network, you're not going to get much interest, right? The world has moved on to the next trend. As bad as it sounds, that's how it works, right? And you can look before this, there was a semiconductor era, right, that enabled the PC era, etc. So every single plateau enables the next. Does that make sense? So you're also going to hear the word, does it scale? So does it scale is actually very interesting. So there are a few companies in the world, so it's actually a little bit of a test. So if you go into an investor presentation and you have your hockey stick slide, right, where we're going to do some work and nothing's going to happen, and then magic is going to happen and we're going to scale like this. We're going to get hockey stick. That usually doesn't happen. So the test is where the quick measure is how much money are you going to make per employee, right? And here I have some brands that you know. Craigslist is the most profitable, 8.5 million per employee. But guess what? They only have 45 employees, right? They're kind of a weird company. Apple has over 100,000 and does 2 million per employee, which is phenomenal, right? Including all the retail employees, which is most of the company these days. Facebook actually beat out Google. Last year they were switched. So Facebook is now more profitable per employee. And I would buy some Facebook stock, sell your Twitter stock, buy some Facebook stock. Google's doing well. Amazon has a lot of warehouse employees. And McDonald's, to give you another example, does only 200,000 per employee worldwide, but it's fast food, right? And they have 400,000 employees worldwide, 440,000 actually. So if you're going in to pitch and you're thinking about, okay, how is this business going to look? And you're trying to make these financial projections for your business, you need to think about what's realistic and how do these businesses actually grow. And usually a successful business in the tech world is about $1 million per year per employee. That's where you want to land in about 5 years. That's believable, right? I mean, there's other factors, but that's what you really should be shooting for. That's the question of, is it scalable or not, right? So you can take the test, you can take any business projection and say, okay, I'm going to start, I'll use an example, I'll start a new restaurant, right? Well, if it scales like this, right, then it could be like maybe a restaurant chain or franchise that might be investable. But if it doesn't scale quite like this, then investors are not going to be really interested. Right? Plus $1 billion market. Now, when you are building your business, don't forget, you're trying to build a repeatable business model. Right? So you're not trying, if you don't have a repeatable business model, if every sale is different for you, the sizes are all over the place, the length of the sale you can't control, guess what? You're a service company. You're not a product company, right? You're providing services. So you have to build a repeatable business. That means you need to measure everything in your business. How much money do you spend on advertising? Where do you advertise? How many hits do you get? How many visitors to the website? How many of them turn into customers or inquiries? You have to figure out your funnel. So if you're an engineer and you really go around and say, oh, I'm just going to get a marketing guy to figure this out, guess what? This is most of the business. So you have to get really good at online marketing and the internet-driven customer acquisition models that most businesses use today, right? Either B2B, you're doing lead generation and you have a sales team selling to those customers, or it's pure sign-up, so you're spending money on Facebook ads or Google ads, etc., and you're getting people to convert into customers or users or downloads of the app, etc., right? So, how many of you are doing mobile apps? How many of you have mobile apps that you spend some money advertising to get downloads? Anybody? Okay. So, as you probably know, and some of you might be surprised, the ads that you see on Facebook, Twitter, etc., on average, it'll cost the advertiser about $50 of advertising to get somebody to download your app. Right? And if it's not designed very well, in 10 seconds, they're gone and it's erased. Right? So think about that. That's going to be the make it or break it. The other thing that we look at very carefully, especially early on, when you don't have any product, you don't have any proof, you don't have any customers, is the team. Now, is it a balanced team? Right? First of all, hiring is very hard, right? So you're saying to yourself, how am I supposed to get a team if I have no money? Right? Well, let's take a look. What you don't have. You don't have much money or any money. You don't have any stability. You don't have any support structure. Right? And you don't have a long-term plan. So how are you supposed to get people to come on board with your startup? You're asking yourself, right? Well, you have some stock, right? And you have some flexibility. They can work any 18 hours a day that they choose, right? That's the flexibility you can offer. So if they're not a morning person, no problem. But the main and most important thing is they get a chance to make a difference. So your early employees, the people you bring in, they're co-founders or right after co-founders, they should be motivated to solve the problem just like you are, right? These are the right type of people to come in at that stage. If they're not very willing and they're there and their main goal is to maximize how much money they're making that moment, that's not the right type of person for you for that stage of a company, right? Now, what we look at is balanced startup team, right? So you need to understand the business that you're getting yourself into. You have to have domain expertise, right? So maybe you stumbled onto an interesting idea, an interesting market, it's growing fast, but why are you going to be the one that wins it, not somebody else? Not a couple of guys out of Stanford that spent 10 years in the industry. Why you? Why should I invest in you? Right? The other thing is you have to be able to engineer the product. This seems obvious, right? But I can show you a lot of presentations where it's a couple of smart sales guys, but they have no idea how to build software, right? And they're pitching a software company. Oh, we'll just outsource it. Nope, you will not just outsource it. Because if you don't have any money and you get some outsourcing company, let's say, to build it for you for some percentage of your company, okay, maybe you give them 5% of your company early on to build it for you. Well, guess what? You're probably going to be wrong with that first version. You're going to have to keep improving it, like we talked about. You have to keep iterating. So what are you going to do? Every time you're going to give them 5%? Pretty soon they're going to own your company. And they don't care. They don't care about your product. It's not their product. They have no stake in the game. They're usually going to give you some engineers that are free, that are on the bench, that might not be engaged in some other project. Oh, and guess what? Somebody sold a new project and their engineers are gone. You have no control over your product, right? So it's a huge red flag for investors because there's no way to understand what was built, how it was built, does it have to be rewritten, and how long is it going to take to get it done and iterate on it, right? How long is my money going to last? Because you're going to sit there trying to find developers for the next 6 months, right? And then ultimately design. I'm totally biased, I have a design education, but design is very important, especially in the mobile world, right? Nobody cares about what kind of database you use. Nobody understands the magic of programming. They care about the user experience. What does it do for them? What are the benefits, right? And that's all design. Starting with your marketing, to all the text that you write, to the way you brand and describe your company and the aspirations that you put behind it, to the product itself and how people use it and what they use it for. Are they frustrated, like they're Salesforce users, right? Or are they happy to use your product and they're delighted and they sit in your application 2 hours every day? That's the difference in design. And you have to think about what is your unfair advantage, right? So I'll give you a hint. It's not, in this case, it's not about being light, it's about being strong. So usually that unfair advantage is that insight that you have into the problem, into the business, because you have much more experience with it than somebody else does. The next smart person, right? That's usually your unfair advantage. Maybe you have a patent, depending on what you're working on. But you have to think about what makes you special. Now, it's easier to start a startup anywhere now than it was in Silicon Valley in 1999. So how many of you were in Silicon Valley in 1999? Okay, a handful. Great. So for those of you that remember those times, it was actually very difficult. To build a software company then, you raise about $5 million. You buy Oracle licenses, a bunch of HP servers, a rack. You hire admins, sysadmins. You rack it all up. You put it in a facility. And then you can write your first line of code. Congratulations. $5 $5 million later. You don't have to do any of that now, right? Because the world changed. Right? So this is the Vatican 2005 and 2013. We went through a little mobile revolution, and it gave us a whole new set of tools of the trade. Right? So for example, we have Amazon Web Services where you can sign up right now, or any number of other hosting companies, and you're in business. You have a web host for pennies, or free. You can take transactions. You can get access to hundreds of millions of potential customers right off the bat by getting into the App Store, right? Any of you ever print software boxes and CDs and try to get a distribution deal with a store and sell your software that way? One person in the back, all right. So those times are gone, right? You don't have to do any of that. You can be live tomorrow. And you have access to advertise. Google AdWords, Facebook, Twitter. You don't need to buy Super Bowl ads to get to your customers, right? People take this for granted, but none of this was around in 1999. None of this, right? This is all new. And venture capital is changing, right? Recognizing this, right? You probably saw a lot of seed funds, right? So when you're raising seed, you're selling a dream, right? Everything is in future tense. You're trying to affect somebody with your idea, with your passion. When you're trying to raise your Series A, and you're going to see a lot of these companies fail this year especially, you better have traction. By that point, everything is in the past tense. What did you do with your seed money? Did you build a product? Did you get any customers? Did you get any traction? It's much, much harder to raise a Series A round because the things that come out of the bowl, right? The bullshit is the filter is quite high, right? If everything is still in the future tense, just wait. We just need a little bit more money. We'll get there. Investors are not going to fund your product and your project, right? So think about that. Now, when we're talking about exits, right? You keep reading on TechCrunch. You hear about these $1 billion, $100 million, several $100 million exits. But the reality is that most exits are somewhere in 10 to 80 million range, right? Even if you look at Y Combinator, right? Magical Y Combinator, and I'm sure everybody knows Y Combinator. #1 accelerator in the world by an order of magnitude as far as results. Companies are worth something like $30 billion that came out of it. Their median exit is 20 million, and they only have about 12% success rate. Right? Even Y Combinator, the Harvard Business School, the Stanford Business School of Startups, only has a 12% success rate and a 20 million exit median. Right? So accelerators are the new business school, and this was actually something that inspired me. Right? I was inspired to write this book because I think the world has changed as far as entrepreneurship goes. Right? So there was a great book in the 90s called The Pocket MBA, and I read it at a very young age and really liked it. And it occurred to me that today accelerators really are the new business school because they allow you to learn by doing and do it very quickly. And a lot of people are actually bypassing traditional business schools because they think, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm just going to go and do it. Right? That's what entrepreneurs do. And business schools are still very valuable, but a lot of people tend to go that way. So that's actually why I was inspired to write the book. So if you look at accelerators, they're advised by mentors. What do they do for you? They fill in knowledge gaps that you may have, right, very quickly. You're surrounded by co-suffering peers. And don't underestimate how important this is. Because the people that you are sitting next to that are working on something entirely different, you're going to all of a sudden be kind of competing with them. Right? And you're going to be learning from each other. That's very important. It's much better than sitting by yourself in a room and not being able to calibrate yourself and figure out what's good and what's not good. Right? And it's also a stamp of approval for seed investors. Depending on the accelerator you get into, if they start building a track record, you inherit that track record. It is much easier for somebody to raise money on a demo day with a bunch of angel investors if they went through an accelerator program the angel investors are familiar with and respect and have seen good results out of. Right? Automatically, it's 10 times easier for you to raise seed money after that. Right? So accelerators are going to be interviewing you if you're going to apply to that program. Now, you also have to do a little bit of interviewing and due diligence yourself. So first of all the accelerators, they list all their mentors on the websites. Right? This is their main thing that they're advertising. Like, look at all the mentors we have, look at the companies, the track record that we've built. We're going to help you get as successful. So first of all, you have to do some homework and figure out, are these the mentors that are proper for my business? Are these people, if I got them as advisors, would they help my business? And then you can get in touch with them and actually find out if they're active or not, or maybe they're just spokespeople for the accelerator, but they don't actually spend any time with the companies. Guess what? That happens a lot. Some of the biggest names with some of the biggest accelerator names, I won't name names, I won't tell you who, but a lot of them are not very active at all. They're not present, they don't spend much time because they're busy with their own products, right? You can get in touch with the companies, with the previous company's CEOs and ask them, hey, what did this accelerator do for you, right? Did you get what you were expecting out of this experience? And also match it, try to figure out, what are you trying to get out of this experience? Are you setting yourself up for disappointment, or are you going to get what you expect, right? Now, when you get accepted into the program and you jump in, you have to remove all your distractions and you have to prepare to focus, right? You have, whatever the length of the program, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, you have to make sure that you get the most out of it, right? You get the most juice out of it. So make sure that your co-founder can deal with the day-to-day so you can focus on the important things you're going to learn in the accelerator. And figure out what milestones you're hoping to achieve, right? It's not a business if you can't measure it. So you're going to spend 3 months in the accelerator. What are you hoping to achieve? What are the measurable things that you're hoping to improve in your business, right? Think about that, and that's your homework for the accelerator. So with that, I'll share a quick video about the book again, and then we can dive into questions. I left lots of time for questions because that's actually more fun and more relevant to you guys.
It's Turkish Airlines.
That is Turkish Airlines. And that's, I think, Istanbul.
A fundamental shift is taking place. Kids around the world are taking down posters of rock stars and athletes and pinning up photos of a new set of heroes, like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg. Though times have changed, education has not kept pace. Traditional business schools are not prepared to provide the evolving skills and mentorship required to build tomorrow's billion-dollar companies. That's where I come in. My name is Vitaly Golomb. I grew up in Silicon Valley and dove headfirst into startups at the age of 13. I've started and sold companies, raised millions, and now I travel to over 20 countries each year to mentor the next generation of tech entrepreneurs. My book, Accelerated Startup, is the culmination of everything I've learned in the Silicon Valley trenches, as well as insights from some of the world's leading entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and angel investors, like Dave McClure of 500 Startups, Mike Butcher of TechCrunch, Steve Blank of Stanford, and many more. This book will not only show you how to get into a top accelerator program, but will give you all the top skills and hacks taught there. You'll have everything you need to accelerate your startup idea to success anywhere. I'm launching Accelerated Startup to build a community of motivated founders around the world. Pre-order today to join the movement.
All right, so we'll dive into questions, and let's see, thank you. So there you go. So you can go to this URL again, get the slides. I saw lots of people taking pictures. They're hidden right now from the outside world, and happy to take your questions. All right, I'll sit here. That's fine. Yes?
What do you think about incubators?
What do I think about incubators? So there's a difference between accelerators and incubators. Incubators are programs more like Idea Lab that don't have a specific, or Rocket Internet for that matter, they don't have a specific timeline. Right? They take in companies, or they have really experienced people coming up with ideas. They execute those ideas, and if it turns into a business, then they spin it out as a separate company. So it's a little bit reverse. Accelerators are programs that have a specific timeline, and they take in companies usually that have been working for a year or two on their own already. They're beyond the idea stage. There are some really early pre-accelerators. There's a bunch of crazy terminology, but the accelerators usually take in some product that has grown, that has something that they can accelerate to the next stage. What do I think about them? Couple of things. So would I start Accelerator? I'm not that brave, because as an investment for accelerators, it's very, very tough to make money. Very tough. Only the top accelerator programs really make money as accelerators, The rest are getting fees and support from government or from they have some other motivation to provide this service to startups. They want to provide, it's a great service for startups. You will learn a ton in most accelerators. Some of them are scam, but most of them, overwhelming majority, will learn a ton. You'll get a lot from it. Now the question is for accelerators is, okay, well, maybe it's an accelerator that doesn't have a big name. By default, somebody applies there because they didn't get into Y Combinator, didn't get into 500 startups or Techstars, or any number of the more famous ones that have been around longer. So they get companies that are kind of too early, or by default, they're not great, right? They don't have as much potential. Sometimes they succeed, but their chance of success are a lot lower. So what that means for the accelerator is that they put in a lot of time and some money into this company, and the entrepreneurs get a great education, they get a great experience, and then that company fails, and then they go on and start the next company, and maybe that next company succeeds, but that accelerator doesn't get any piece of that company, of the new company, right? So for accelerators, it's tough. There are lots of different programs, like Founder Institute is a great program that does it right, that people kind of pay for the tuition, and at the university kind of saw it back in 2009 and designed it that way, where they get a little bit of piece of equity, but they get paid for the education they provide. And then you have programs like Y Combinator, obviously they put in a lot of money, they're very selective, and some of those companies become unicorns, right? There are half a dozen companies that, out of their almost 1,000 that they've invested in, about half a dozen have become huge companies, right? For the other accelerators, either they're aspiring, they know they're investing time and money and they want to become top-tier accelerator, so they have to invest in their own marketing and their own success, and it takes a lot of effort. Or they're doing it for some other reason. Maybe it's a corporate accelerator that's looking to get some new ideas and work with some talented entrepreneurs, right? So it's needed. It's a very interesting thing. It's a very hard business if you're going into it as kind of investment mindset. I'm going to invest in a bunch of companies and I'm going to be a successful investor. That's tough to prove that point these days, right? Very few profitable accelerators. I guess I answered all the other questions. Yes.
What's your recommendation if I only have one idea, and what should I do to build my own startup company?
If you have an idea and you want to build your startup, what's my recommendation?
Yeah.
Everything I just said in the last hour.
The first thing you think is the most important one?
The first thing I would recommend from experience is that you find at least one co-founder that is as passionate about your idea and provides something that you can't. So if you're an engineer, you find somebody that can sell and market, or vice versa. You need to build a team. You can't really do it on your own. There are very few people that are, that have both sides of the brain, that they can write code, design, and sell and market and everything by themselves. So you have to build a team. It's usually much bigger than one person. So that's the first thing. Second thing is build something and get it in front of your customers as quickly as possible and get feedback. That's the most important thing, and do that as quickly and as many times as possible until you start figuring out what they need, what they want, what they're willing to give you money for or spend their time on. Yes?
What are you thinking about crowdfunding for startups?
Crowdfunding is tough. It's crowdfunding for startups, depending on exactly what you mean. So you can almost call AngelList crowdfunding, right? But not really. AngelList has more of a kind of a crowd mentality, where if you talk to AngelList and you're launching a startup on AngelList, the best way to do it is to get actually a good investor to back you and support you. So when you launch there, it's almost like a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter or somewhere else, where you launch and you already have traction. You're not just starting from zero. If that investor is well respected on the platform, then people will invest. It's called social proof, right? They will invest just because that person's investing. Like, I believe in that person, right? So Dave McClure had a big, early days of AngelList, Dave McClure was the most followed, and every time he promotes something, all the other angel investors would jump on it and invest, right? There's crowdfunding platforms that will, there are only two forms. So there's kind of free form because there's now rules where you can kind of sort of raise a little bit of money from people, 2,000, 5,000, up to 10,000 if they're a non-certified investor. But those things, again, they don't really work, because to really find good investments, if you're a professional investor, this is what you do all day, every day. You're not going to be investing $5, $10, $20,000, right? You're going to be investing more. And then there are platforms that are regulated where basically the platform will pre-screen deals. They will take a deal. One was Micro Ventures, for example, that I work with my company. They would take it on and they would actually put together a private placement memo. They would actually do it like a bank would try to fund an existing company. They would do a small version of that, and they would actually promote it to their members. And all their members are qualified investors, and it's kind of done privately. And they're actually the ones out there selling why people should invest in this. So there are a few different forms of it. It's tricky. There are kind of two Silicon Valleys that I'll tell you kind of if you don't already know. There are two Silicon Valleys. There's a Silicon Valley and beyond where people kind of stuck in the echo chamber, right? They're only going to startup meetups. They're only going to startup competitions. They won this startup competition, that startup competition, but they have zero customers a year or two later, right? They're stuck in this echo chamber. And then you have people that have done it before. They do it professionally. A lot of them you've never heard of. They don't go out to any events. They don't socialize. They're out there, very quietly building their startup. They're well connected to the investment industry because they may have worked in a startup that worked before. They grew really quickly, and they build those contacts and they build that trust. And for them to raise money is very easy, right? So where you might be struggling to raise $100,000 for a year and a half, they can close $2 million with their friend over dinner because they have a relationship. It's very much a relationship business. So that's something that you have to invest in as well. Is you have to invest in building relationships and making sure that you're known and people trust you. Because somebody's handing you, a couple $1 million, if they don't know you, that's just not going to happen, right? Or it's going to take a very long time for somebody to get to know you enough to trust you and want to do that. Yeah.
You go
first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's going on outside of Silicon Valley, like in Istanbul, Berlin, and obviously in Shenzhen, there's a lot going on. And how are some of the startups and the accelerator incubators, how are they doing things differently than here?
So let's see. So the way they're doing things differently is, I'll give you an example. The way they should be thinking differently, and the advantage that these other regions have is that they're working on a market that U.S. companies are now looking at, right? So Arabic-speaking market, 300 million population. Sure, there's some problems in the Middle East, but for those of you that have visited the Middle East, people don't ride camels and live in tents. It's a bustling economy. It's a very young economy, and people need everything. U.S. companies are not going there anytime soon, right? You look at any other place around the world. Indonesia, 250 million population, most of it under 30, very quickly growing. Like if I was to start a company today, I'd probably do it in Indonesia because they need everything and all the conditions are right, and there's very little competition, professional competition. So that's what they should be looking at. Instead, what they're looking at, and I keep hearing this, is they're looking at the U.S. market, right? Especially in Eastern Europe, the economies are not big, or they're not doing well, or other regions. So they're thinking, well, we're going to make a business SaaS, and we're going to sell it to U.S. companies. And my first question is, great, so have you spent any time in the U.S.? No, but we're building it now. We've been building it for the last year. We're going to build some more, and then we're going to start selling to the U.S. We'll find a partner, and that's just bad, that's wrong mentality because they don't understand the market, they don't understand the customer and their needs, right? It's the first time they're meeting the customer. On average, it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to hire engineers. It's a lot harder to come by experienced sales and marketing people that have built businesses and scaled businesses. That's again what I was talking about. That's why a lot of them end up coming here to scale the business side of the world. But smart companies actually recognize that, and I know a few that, for example, have 100 people in Ukraine, and they outsource their sales and marketing to the US. So they build a small team of 15 people here that sell, and they take advantage of the market here, and they have a big team in Eastern Europe, which is a lot cheaper for development, right? Much lower cost of living. The accelerators, a lot of the money comes from government, and the government is very, very misguided in a lot of places. Poland's probably the biggest offender. There's over 200 registered venture funds in Poland, and it's all Polish and EIF, European Investment Fund money. They're trying to create jobs. But the reality is that startups hardly create jobs, right? The one out of 1,000 that works will create a few hundred jobs. You're much better off trying to attract somebody like Samsung to open a new center and hire 1,000 people, or General Electric, right? So You have investors that have no idea what a good startup looks like early on. They're making investment decisions with money that's not their own. They're motivated by the fees that they get, the management fees they get off that money, instead of the big wins that they're supposed to be motivated by, right? So investors around here will barely take a salary, right, from the investment fund because they're putting as much money as possible into these big investments because they want to get $1 billion out sometime later, right? So the mentality is different, and it's improving slowly but surely, right? I have a whole different talk on kind of ecosystems, but there are a few things that need to line up in a given ecosystem, including like culture of entrepreneurship, supporting entrepreneurs, where, for example, in Korea or Japan, failing is seen as very, very bad, right? Or if you fail in Dubai and your company goes negative, you're going to go to debtor's prison, right? You're going to go to prison because your company goes bankrupt and you can't pay the bills. So, that's a big part of it, is the government has to be, the rules have to be set properly, the economy has to support entrepreneurship, and culturally it has to be okay as well, right? So there's a million, I can talk about that for the next 3 hours, like the differences. But a lot of people are learning, yeah. In the back.
What's your outlook on incubators, accelerators, and VC firms that specifically deal with growing industries such as medical marijuana? And what's your outlook on them?
Well, it's a growing industry, but it will probably end up being kind of a separate whole ecosystem, much like industry that has the most internet traffic that people don't really talk about, the porn industry, right? It's a whole different world, different investors, different people work just in that industry. So it's likely going to be something like that. There are some accelerators, I think 500 startups invested and took in a couple of companies to experiment with that segment, but it's seen as risky. And at the end of the day, investors, venture capitalists, and accelerators are raising money from their investors, and their investors might be a retirement fund, right? It might be CalPERS, the biggest retirement fund in the world, which is California Public Employees Retirement Fund, right? They're a big investor, worldwide actually. And they might have rules against things like that, right? They won't invest, they won't allow you to invest in certain things. So it's going to be tricky. There's certainly opportunities, but some people are, it's going to be very difficult to raise money, much more difficult than kind of the average trendy thing.
What's your outlook on the newer incubators and accelerators that specifically deal with this industry?
I can't say that I know much about them,
Okay.
honestly. I haven't really encountered them yet.
I have two questions. The first one is, from your experience or statistical data that's showing what's the numbers of co-founders that more likely to make a startup successful?
It's usually 2 or 3.
Why?
Remember the pyramid? You need to have a complete team. That's very important. Usually, that's not going to be in one person. That's going to be at least 2 people, right? Sometimes 3. And you need that sounding board, right? You're going to have more bad days than good. You need to have somebody that you can talk to and kind of emotionally support each other. That's what I would say. There are studies on this. There are statistics. You could probably do a search and you could find some better insights on that I can give you.
So the second one is, besides the same level of passions about the problem you want to solve and the different knowledge or skill that you want in your co-founders, what are the other important things or criteria you want to pick your co-founders?
Oh, sure. So just like in marriage, when you're looking for co-founders, it's actually more difficult to get divorced from your co-founders or your investors than your spouse. Because if it's working, you're in it for a long time. Opposites attack, right? You have to be able to find people that you can work with. That's actually what a lot of investors look for is, they'll look at a co-founding team and say, hey, have you guys worked together or did you just meet like last week? Because you need to understand how well you work with this person, how well you work under pressure. If you say, this is my best friend from childhood, we've started 3 companies before, great, done. But if it's somebody that you have no experience working with, even if they on paper complement your skills, it's going to be very difficult. And it's going to be, good investors are good at reading people and kind of interviewing and seeing, would I hire this person? Would I then fund them? Would I give them money? This is what kind of the mindset is. You're trying to figure out, can these people work under pressure? Are they crazy smart? Do they have all the skills and experience they need for this particular startup? And you need to make sure that you don't have any gaps. I'll give you an example. There's a startup that I'm advising right now that's raising money. They're kind of in the fashion industry, or fashion related. I won't get too specific, but the co-founding team, they have great credentials as engineers, as building products, and even have a couple of successes in the past, but they have nobody from the fashion industry. Even all their advisors are very engineering heavy. And the first couple of serious investment meetings they had, and they're doing well, they're growing, they're making money, they're profitable. The question was, well, you know what, that's great, but for you to get to be really big, you're going to need to know the industry really well. So if you don't already know it, you need to recruit people that are respected in that industry, that know what they're doing, and are kind of leaders in the industry. That's very important. Yes?
How do you think, what is the profile of an investor that would be interested in a digital agency selling services and building products?
It certainly would not be a venture investor. It might be angel investors. It would be people that are from the industry. Maybe they sold a similar company 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and they really like that industry and they want to be part of it. Because the best you can offer them, the service company, is some dividends a few years down the road. The company is doing well. Are you going to build the next Leo Burnett agency? Probably not. Right? That industry, that thing has sailed in the 60s. Right, that was done. But you might be able to build a company that has 20 people, does 5-10 million a year. Everybody's very happy, and the investor gets dividends on profits. But the type of investor that would look at that would be some kind of private investor that understands that industry and can evaluate whether you have a better chance than somebody else doing the same thing. Yes?
Do we pay advisors or not?
It's a good question. Depends on your stage. So try not to, right? Some advisors are willing to kind of be part of the company very, very, very part-time and get a little equity, right? You might be able to get people that way, but some things you will not be able to find advisors for, and you're going to have to hire consultants. Usually early on, most companies don't have a budget for that. But as you get bigger, that could be a way, you spend some money, you hire an expensive consultant, but you get huge benefit out of that. You get their contacts, you get insights that would take you a year to figure out on your own. Some cases, that's the only way to do it. There's a reason McKinsey does this for big companies. There's a reason, BCG, McKinsey, all these companies exist, and they sell $5 million PowerPoint to big companies because it works. And there's kind of an analog for that in the startup world, like early stage world as well.
Thank you. How long it takes so an angel investor, he can write a check right away, right? And how long it takes a VC to fund? Does it take 6 months, or it depends on the VC? Some of them will make it a couple of weeks. And
there's no rule. VCs can write a check quickly as well, but they need to go through a process and be convinced. So an average venture firm partner will get probably, 1,000 pitches by email or 1,000 introductions a year, a couple every day. They might look at maybe 10% of that. They'll have a meeting. And that first meeting, they're looking for a reason to say yes, right? 90% of the time after that first meeting, they'll say, you know what, good job, great, but there's certain things that just don't work for us. Keep in touch, let us know, blah, blah, blah. You've all heard this. Once you get through that, and you get to the second stage, they've kind of convinced themselves, okay, this is an interesting sector that we know something about, that we've researched, that we're specifically looking companies at, and this might be a good one. So now let's dig in a little bit deeper and find reasons to say no. Right? This is when they're going to be looking very closely at the team, at the product, at your financials, their projections, trying to compare it to other companies they know that have a similar business model in a different business. It's a lot of signals intelligence, right? They're trying to see the hundreds or thousands of companies they've seen. They're trying to make connections in their brain. What does this look like? And does it have a chance of success? Is this the right company to invest in? So you might have a series of several different meetings where they're trying to convince themselves that there's nothing to say no to, right? And then they might go ahead. The best way to actually control that process is when you're approaching fundraising for your company, it's really like an enterprise sale. You build a list of prospects, right? These are venture firms that are actively investing in your space. They haven't invested in your competition. they're the right size, so that means that they write the check at the right time. They're looking at companies at your stage, right? You're not too late, you're not too early for them, and there's various ways of figuring this out. And then you try to get connections to them, right? You get a personal introduction to them. That's the first step of the filter. If you just send them an email, nothing's going to happen. You get tens of thousands of emails every day, and even if you go to their website to submit a business plan, that's a way to punish interns, right? It's like, here, you have nothing to do today? Great, go read some business plans, right? It doesn't lead to anything. So you need to build that relationship. You need somebody to vouch for you, introduce you to the right person at the firm that's looking at your types of businesses, and you need to send them a short pitch, 3 sentences. What does the company do? Why is it cool? Is there any kind of traction? Kind of what stage is it at? Is it selling? Is it growing? And why is this a great team? That's usually how I make the introduction. You don't send the deck, right? The deck is just there to support you. It's your over the shoulder when you're doing the presentation. But on those 3 sentences and that introduction, they should be able to decide, is this for me and should I take the meeting? Right? And then from there, you have to sell. So that's usually how you would look at fundraising.
Would you send the deck if they ask for it after the meeting?
I recommend usually no. Because if they won't take the meeting from that introduction and from the brief introduction saying the right things about the company, that should give the check off the right things on the list, then it's very likely that it's not a strong enough connection, it's probably a waste of time. Right? So if sending them the deck is what's preventing you from going to the next stage with them, they're probably not the right investor. Right? It's probably not a match. And by the way, remember, when you meet with investors, if it's not a yes, it's a no. If it's anything but a yes, it's a no. Keep in touch, let us know how it goes, blah, blah, blah. That's all soft no. Just move on. They don't want to be rude. They don't want to, they don't want to insult your baby, your company, right? They don't want to call your baby ugly. They might not understand your business well enough, right? They're going to try to let you down softly and break up with you. And keep in touch means I'll run into you at an event and say hi, right? So, but yeah.
So to that though, so say you're just missing traction and you're you have maybe some seed and you're looking for like, a couple $1 million in an A round, but you don't quite have the traction that you need, and they're like, looks good, come back to us when you have traction. Is that a BS answer, or you take them at your word?
That's probably the most common answer. That's the most, like, everything looks great except you have no customers, you have no business. It's like, it's a pretty car, but there's no engine in it.
Would you go back to those people if you do?
You would, but you would give it some time. So if you start going out and you're doing your meetings and you're getting, 3 times in a row, you have smart investors that say the same thing to you, you need to hit the brakes because you only really get a chance to make the first impression once. You need to hit the brakes and fix whatever's broken. You don't just keep going through all the meetings and then blow all those introductions and your time and their time and everything else, because it's going to be very difficult for you to come back to them second time. Usually, like 90% of the time, they'll say, no thanks. But if you come back to them and say, if they genuinely said, you got some feedback like, this looks awesome, but we're really curious about this one thing, if you can prove it, let us know, and it doesn't smell like bullshit, then you can take a pause for 6 months, get it fixed, and then show 6 months of growth, come back to them and say, look, I fixed it. That's valid, right? But the other thing too is that investors are not in the business of risk. Investors are in the business of reducing risk. So what that means is that if you come to me, if everything looks great, I will kind of somewhere in there, I'll slip in a question like, okay, well, where are you in the process? And if you're like, oh, we just had a meeting with this guy and we have a couple of meetings in a couple of weeks, and I'll go, oh, you know what? I don't have to do anything right now. I'm just going to keep in touch and see how this develops. I'm going to let you make mistakes on your own money or somebody else's money, and I'm going to invest in the absolutely last minute that I need to come into the company. I'm going to de-risk this investment, right? So that means that for you to actually close a round, you have to build up this momentum, right? And all the VCs talk to each other, especially in particular sectors. And if you're out there and you schedule 50 meetings with all the VCs in a particular period of time, all of a sudden you're raising money. And if all the check boxes are checked and everything is good and people are thinking that's a pretty good investment, all of a sudden you're going to create this fear of missing out, right? And that's what you're trying to create. You're trying to create, so when you're out there fundraising, you need to time cap it, right? You're going to spend, you're going to do your homework, you're going to get everything ready, you're going to ask for your introductions, and then you're going to have an intense month of first meetings. So let's say you have 30, 40, 50, 100 meetings, first meetings. Then you need to very quickly get to the next stage. So out of 50 meetings, first meetings, you might get to 10 or 15 second meetings, right? And you have to keep pushing those until at the end, if you're good and lucky, you're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 companies that want to give you a term sheet. At that point, you have leverage because you don't have to say yes to any one of them. You can actually negotiate, right? And pick and choose who you want to take money from. And by the way, it's not the highest valuation that wins, but the right investors are going to help you a lot more than just giving you money. They're going to help you recruit, they're going to give you strategy, they have a lot of experience, they'll give you connections, all these things, right? So you have to pick based on that, not just the money, right? To give you a lower valuation and Sequoia wants to give you a check, take it, for example. There's also reasons not to take a check from Sequoia, that's a different conversation. Anybody else? Back?
So how do you see the success of these investors actually?
Say it again?
How do you see the success of these investors to this ecosystem?
How do you see success of an investor?
Yeah, success rate. I mean, general statistics show that VCs and angel investor cannot make enough money out of this investment.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
So
what are your motivations, and are you suggesting any other investor to go to this field for their money to invest, to make money?
So angel investing is very tough. You're basically going to make about, if you're thinking of getting into angel investing, you're going to make probably about 20 investments, and you're going to basically pay to learn, right? Unless you have some kind of other indirect experience with investing and seeing companies go from idea to the next stage, and not just 1 or 2, but dozens. So where you start developing that filter and figuring out what did it look like, what are the signs that this thing is going to work in the beginning, right? You're going to, you have to make 20 investments to statistically be able to have any kind of portfolio, right? This gets into like financial theory and portfolio theory. But you need about 20 investments to have any kind of chance of success as an angel investor, and you need to be pretty selective, right? You don't just say yes to everything that you see, right? And you invest in people that you know, that you believe, that you trust, that you have respect for, etc. Right? And you invest in things that you understand as well. Venture capital is kind of a long game. Most VC firms, and there are about something like 700 firms registered in Bay Area in California, or the US, and there are many more hundreds worldwide. Most of them do not raise a second fund because most of them don't provide good returns. The basics of venture capital, you raise, you get somebody else's money, you go to your investors as a venture capitalist. It might be your own money, but usually it's somebody else's money. And you pitch them and say, this is what we think is going to happen in the next 10 years in technology, and this is what we're investing in, and this is our track record as investors at other funds or what have you, or as entrepreneurs. Here's why you should believe us and give us your money for 10 years. Right? You're going to lock up your money for 10 years. And they'll promise a 20% IRR, internal rate of returns, 20% a year. That means I need to return the money 6 times, minimum of 6 times, for that investment to be successful. The reason for that is because you lock the money up for such a long period of time in it, for 10 years. You can otherwise take your money and just put it into stocks and day trade all day long, right? Or just put it into S&P or put it into a CD and you can take it out any time. So there's certain minimums for investors, for funds. So you're usually not going to them and don't take it personally, right? If they say no, it's because they're trying to make good decisions for their investors and for their fund, because they need to report their numbers and try to raise the next fund, right? They might start investing out of their funds. 2 years later, they need to start seeing some kind of results, that the valuations of these companies are getting better, because they need to go back out to their investors and start raising the next fund, right? So it's very tricky. If anybody asks, how do I get into VC? Usually, if they are asking that question, that means that they're not ready. They don't understand the industry or know the industry well enough to actually get in there and lead a fund. But there are ways, like MBAs from Stanford just go across the street, goes associates across Sand Hill Road, and that's one path into. There's basically 2 paths, right? So one is top tier MBA and work your way from the bottom in a VC firm. If you get in there, one of 3,000 people, 3,000 applicants gets hired, or you're a successful entrepreneur and you either start your own fund with your own money and you do well as an investor, and then other people give you money. Or you get invited. If you created a unicorn for Andreessen Horowitz, you had $1 billion exit. They just brought on a new partner for a new fund that they just announced this week. He had $1 billion exit that Andreessen Horowitz invested in. So now they invite him to be a partner in the firm because he's proved that he's able to do these things. So, but angel investment is tough, and you're going to see a lot of angel investors run away this year because everybody got excited. Look at all these things happening. There's a little bit of a bubble. There's no other word for it, and it's going to deflate a little bit. I think mid-April, when the first quarter numbers come out for this year, people are going to be a little surprised and scared.
So you said to measure everything to figure out your funnel. What were some of the things you didn't think that, or what are some of the things that you should have measured, or you didn't know that you had to measure?
Things that I didn't know, well, so I'll give you an example. My company was doing B2B. So B2B sales, when you're generating traffic online, you're usually doing lead generation, right? So you're buying up ads that go to a page, that leave a, they look at a little video about your company, about your product, they leave their information, and then a salesperson calls them, does a couple of demos, a couple of phone calls, and tries to close them. So what we measured is how much money are we spending per click, how many people are landing on the site, how many are getting to the second stage and entering their, qualifying themselves, entering their information, getting contacted by a salesperson. So we actually had a pre-qualifier call them and actually asked them a few more questions to see if they're actually a qualified customer. So we qualify something like 25%, right? So something like 1 out of 10 people will go through the first gate, just give us their basic information. 1 out of 10 or 20 of those would actually fill out the whole form. About 1 out of 4 of those was actually qualified, got a call from a salesperson. And then we had a 1 in 3 close rate, right, that turned into. So you can calculate, if the click costs you on average X, you can calculate how much that lead costs you and how much that customer costs you, right? So it ended up costing us a few hundred dollars per customer to acquire them, right? So you need to understand what's your cost of CAC, cost of acquisition per customer, right? And then you need to think about, okay, how long are they going to stick around? Are they going to stick around for a year, for a month? If they're going to stick around for a month and they pay $20 and you pay $200 to get them, you don't have a business. That's actually the problem with a lot of these unicorns right now, why they're dying, is that they're raising huge rounds of money to acquire customers very unprofitably, just try to kill their competition and see if the market then improves and their cost of acquisition lowers as their competition disappears. Food delivery startups are having a huge problem right now because they were all doing this. Like there's a reason, $5 lunch with free delivery in San Francisco, that's not profitable, you know that, right? So that can't last. So you have to measure it all the way through and figure out if you're doing a discount and you're taking basically, so let's say some food delivery company is saying, okay, it costs us $20 to get somebody to sign up for a free trial, and we're going to give them a free sandwich, and then we're going to give them $5 sandwiches for the next 3 months until we turn them into a $10 per sandwich person. They're thinking, okay, how much are we paying for them to eat? And that's their marketing cost. Like, they have to figure out, okay, how long is this customer then going to stick around? How much a month are we going to get out of them? Are we ever going to see this money back? And if they see it in under a year and they can prove it, then it's a business. But if they see that they're never going to get that money back, that's why a lot of these companies are stumbling now, these big companies. Yes?
What would you say the importance of patents is in terms of startups these days?
0. And I'll tell you why. Best case scenario, it takes 18 months to get a patent. Best case scenario. I've had a software patent take 5 years, and then at some point I said, you know what, this is irrelevant, and just quit. And give it up after $40,000 of legal fees. So the problem is that the patent system is broken, and the patent examiners, they're so busy, there's not enough of them, right? Because you have to be a lawyer and you have to be an engineer or whatever segment is. You need to understand what it is you're reading, that it takes forever. And by the time you sit there and spend all this money and time on a patent, 3 generations of technologies are going to go by. So I'm an advisor to a company called Rimac Automobili. Some of you probably saw some news about them, the Croatian electric car company that's faster than the Tesla. It's $1 million, but it's faster than the Tesla. So the company has pioneered a bunch of electric vehicle technology, and at some point a few years ago just stopped making patents because it's just a waste of money and time. Because by the time they get the patent, they've already moved on with next generation technology. So your best thing to do is to move really, really fast. When you get bigger, then you start doing patents because you get big enough for other big companies to target you, and it's just defensive. But early on, it should not be something that you care about at all. You have way too many other things that will kill your business much faster to be concerned about.
You have time for one more question, please.
Make it a good one.
Evaluation of company, how you evaluate the company?
What stage?
An early stage.
Early stage, so imagination stage. Yeah, so it's largely done on comps, right? So what is a company that has this many people, that has this much revenue, that approximately has this type of business model, and might get into this big of a size? What are they going for? Like, what's the going rate for these type of companies? That's usually the valuation methodology that's used for early stage, right? Kind of standard valuations. If you have a celebrity founder, then they can, you have a big competition for a round, you can kind of bid it up. But there's reasons for you not to try to get too expensive early on, because when you're selling a dream and you raise money, a lot of Y Combinator companies get in trouble this way. So I'll give you an example. So where an average company might be worth $4 or $5 million as a one form of valuation, the same company coming out of Y Combinator might get 12 or 15 million valuation just because they're coming out of Y Combinator, right? Social proof. So, and there's lots of competition for those deals. The problem is that by the time they get to the next round, they need to be worth a lot more, right? They need to be worth double. And a lot of them get into trouble because they'll go to a down round. It's a very unhappy thing. So you need to kind of fall into certain comps, right? Be approximately worth what these companies are approximately worth in your business model, in your area, right? So a company that's worth $5 million here might be worth only $1 million or less in Eastern Europe. And the reason for that is that the business will develop much slower rate, and the M&A, like if they fail, the down case scenario, which is 80%, there's going to be nobody there to buy them, right? So you're playing the lottery, you're going to like lose all your money, or they succeed, and it's a smaller chance of success, and it's going to take longer, right? So that's the reason that the valuations float. I've seen some educated people in business that don't really understand early stage try to do DCF. So how many of you have an MBA? Anybody? Okay, some MBAs. So DCF analysis, right? Discounted cash flows. You look at the last few years of the company, you try to project the same growth rate into the future. But if you look back and there's nothing, like how are you supposed to really evaluate the company? Right? So the traditional ways of valuing companies are not really relevant for a startup world. And most investors understand, these companies go for approximately this much. This is how much it costs me to get into a deal. It's either going to work or 80% chance it's going to go to zero, right? So they have to understand that. That's why it takes 20 companies to invest in, where you have a chance of maybe 1 or 2 of them going to the next stage, statistically. If you're the god of angel investing and you're really good at picking and you get into the best deals with the best entrepreneurs, then maybe half your companies will actually get to the next stage, but not more. All right, well, thank you very much. If you have any questions, if you go to this link, there's actually a little form on there. Feel free to ask me a question. I will try to respond as quickly as possible, and keep in touch. Good luck.
Thank you, Vitaly. Thank you all for coming. Again, pre-order the book. You'll get all the secrets to accelerators and venture capital, and it'll be exciting to see it launch at the end of the year.
Yep.
And as well as if you have any questions about our accelerator for TechCode, we'll be launching our accelerator in April, and it's focused on AI times hardware. So if you have a hardware company that has an AI component, artificial intelligence, please come talk to me, as well as if you're interested in going to China on a supply chain aspect or potential investment aspect, we are going to be conducting a trip late March, early April. And usually the business trips are between 3 and 5 days. We coordinate all the manufacturer, supplier, investor, customer meetings for you. So it's really a trip about conversion. Thanks again, and be on the lookout for all our events in the future.